What if one day you woke up and realized the life you'd spent decades building, the little routines, the quiet freedoms, the spaces that whispered you, had slipped through your fingers, not because time stole it, but because you handed it over, trusting it was for the best. At 92, I've seen life unfold in ways I never expected, weathered storms I thought would break me, and collected a treasure trove of lessons along the way. But there's one choice that still haunts me, a shadow I can't shake. The day I moved into a nursing home. Back then, it felt like the right path. My family painted a picture of comfort and care, a soft landing for my later years. I believed them. Why wouldn't I? They wanted what was best for me, and I trusted their promises of a life made easier. But oh, how different the reality turned out to be. If you're watching this, maybe you're standing at a crossroads yourself, weighing this option for you or someone you love. Maybe it feels like the safest bet, the simplest fix. But before you take that leap, I want to pull you close, like we're sharing a cup of coffee at my old kitchen table, and tell you 6 things I wish someone had whispered in my ear before I signed away my world. Because once you step inside those doors, everything changes, and leaving, that's a dream harder to chase than you'd ever guess. Stick with me, friend. These lessons aren't just mine. They might just be the lifeline you or someone you care about needs. Some might catch you off guard. Others might stir a quiet ache of recognition. And when we're done, I'll share one more piece of the story, a new chapter that ties it all together. Ready? Let's walk this road side by side. Regret. 1. The day independence slipped away. The first morning I woke up in the nursing home. I stretched out my arms, expecting the familiar creak of my old wooden bed frame and the soft glow of sunlight sneaking through my curtains. Instead, my hands brushed against cold, unfamiliar sheets. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, and the walls, bare, beige, unyielding, stared back at me. I reached for the novel I'd been reading at home, a dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, only to realize it wasn't there. My books, my chair, the chipped mug I'd sipped tea from for years, they were gone. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a new address. It was a new life, one where I wasn't the one holding the reins. Before I moved in, my days were mine to shape. I'd shuffle to the kitchen at dawn if I felt like it, frying eggs just the way I liked them, yolks runny, edges crisp. If the mood struck, I'd pull on my worn sneakers and wander down the block, nodding at the neighbor's tabby cat sunning itself on the porch. At night, I'd sink into my armchair with a book or the hum of the radio, letting the hours unfold however I pleased. But here, everything ran like clockwork, someone else's clockwork. Breakfast at 8, whether my stomach growled or not. Lights out at 10, even if my mind was still buzzing. Want to step outside for some air? You'd better ask, and then wait until a busy aide could spare a moment to walk with you. I'll never forget my first week, sitting at a table with a plate of lukewarm oatmeal I didn't choose, surrounded by faces I didn't know. A woman named Clara, 79, and sharp as a tack, leaned over and whispered, "You'll get used to it." But that was the problem. I didn't want to get used to it. I'd spent a lifetime deciding the small things, what to wear, when to rest, how to fill my afternoons. Now, those choices felt like rare treasures dangled just out of reach. I'd catch myself staring out the window, imagining the crunch of gravel under my feet, the breeze tugging at my scarf, things I'd taken for granted until they were locked behind a schedule I didn't write. The hardest part? Once you let go of that independence, clawing it back feels like climbing a mountain with no peak in sight. You stop fighting the meal times. You stop asking to go outside. You mold yourself to their system because you have to, but bit by bit, you lose the edges of who you were. If this choice is on your horizon, pause and ask, are you ready to trade the quiet freedoms that stitch your days together? Because once they're gone, you'll feel their absence like a missing heartbeat. Regret too, the echo of being forgotten mom. We'll visit all the time, my daughter Sarah promised, her voice warm and certain as she hugged me goodbye that first day. I clung to those words like a lifeline. In the beginning, they held true. Sarah breezed in every Tuesday with a smile and a bag of my favorite lemon drops. My grandkids, Jake and Lily, tumbled through the door on weekends, their laughter bouncing off the sterile walls. For a while, I felt tethered to the life I'd left behind. But time has a way of shifting things, doesn't it? Weeks turned into months, and the visits tapered off like a river drying up. Sarah's job got busier. She'd call instead, her voice crackling through the phone with apologies. Jake started college. Lily picked up soccer. Holidays stung the most. We'll be there for Christmas, they'd say. But then a snowstorm hit, or someone caught a cold, and I'd end up alone in the common room, watching the flickering TV while others gazed at the door, waiting for faces that never came. It wasn't that they stopped loving me. Life just moved on. When you're not there every day, when you're not at the table for Sunday dinner, or in the yard waving as they drive off, it's easy to fade into the background. One evening, I sat in my room, the silence pressing in like a heavy quilt. My old rotary phone, a gift from my late husband, sat on the nightstand, its cord coiled neatly. I picked it up, thumb hovering over the buttons, wanting to call Sarah. But what would I say? I'm lonely? I miss you? I didn't want to weigh her down with guilt, so I set it back down and stared at the ceiling, the ache settling into my chest. There was a man down the hall, Henry, who'd been a truck driver for 40 years. He used to regale us with tales of the open road, dusty highways, neon diners, the hum of his rig under the stars. But after his wife passed and his kids stopped coming, he'd sit by the window, tracing the same routes in his mind, waiting for a knock that never sounded. If you're thinking about this step, ask yourself, can you bear the quiet that comes when the world keeps spinning without you? No matter how much they care, distance makes it easy to slip out of sight and out of mind. If this rings true, drop a number 2 in the comments. I'd love to know you're with me. Regret 3. A purpose. Left behind, back home. My days had a rhythm, a heartbeat of their own. I'd shuffle out to water my geraniums, their red petals nodding in the sun, or brew a pot of coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Even tidying up, a swipe at the dust, a stack of mail sorted, gave me a quiet sense of doing. But when I moved into the nursing home, that pulse faded. Someone else cooked the meals, scrubbed the floors, tended the plants, if there even were any. At first I thought, this is it. Finally, a chance to rest. No more chores, no more fuss. But rest without purpose, it's a hollow thing. The days stretched out, long and shapeless. I'd sit in the lounge, the TV droning with shows I didn't care for, watching the clock tick toward nothing. I saw it in others too. Take George, a wiry 84-year-old with hands that could tell a story of their own. He'd been a carpenter, built his own house, crafted toys for his grandkids, fixed anything that broke. At home, his garage was his kingdom, filled with the scent of sawdust and the clatter of tools. Here, his hands rested in his lap, empty and still. "I feel like a ghost," he told me one afternoon, his voice rough with frustration. "Nothing to fix, nothing to make, just waiting." I felt it too. Without those small acts, pouring a glass of water, tending a garden, even folding laundry, life lost its edges. I'd always been the one to knit scarves for the kids or bake cookies for the neighbors. Now, my knitting needles sat in a box somewhere, and the kitchen was off limits. Purpose isn't just about big dreams. It's the little threads that tie you to the world. Strip those away, and you're left adrift, a boat with no anchor. If this choice looms ahead, ask, what keeps your spirit humming? Because in a place where everything's done for you, holding on to meaning takes a fight you might not expect. Regret 4. A body betrayed by stillness. Before the nursing home, I was no Olympian, but I held my own. I'd lug groceries up the front steps, stretch my creaky joints in the morning sun, or take a slow loop around the park, the crunch of leaves underfoot, keeping me company. Those routines kept me steady, my legs strong, my breath even. But once I settled in here, that changed faster than I could have imagined. Meals arrived on trays. No need to chop or stir. Help was a button away. No need to fetch anything myself. It sounded like a gift, but it was a thief in disguise. Within weeks, I felt it. My knees stiffened from too much sitting. My arms, once sturdy from years of lifting and carrying, grew soft. Getting up from a chair became a negotiation with my own body. Grit my teeth, brace my hands, hope I didn't wobble. I watched it happen to Alice too, a spry 81-year-old who'd arrived with a twinkle in her eye and a stubborn streak a mile wide. She'd march laps around the courtyard declaring, "Age is just a number." But as the months wore on, the walks slowed. Then came the walker, then the wheelchair. One day, she caught my eye across the dining hall and murmured, "I don't know how I got here so fast. It's not laziness, it's design." When everything's made effortless, you stop moving. And when you stop moving, your body forgets how to fight. I wish I'd known to push back, to pace the halls, lift my arms, anything to keep the rust from settling in. If this is your next step, ask, will you find the will to keep your strength when the world doesn't ask you to? Because once it slips, it's a steep climb back. Drop a number 4 in the comments if this hits home. Regret, the vanishing veil of privacy. At home, my little house was my sanctuary. I could shut the door, sink into silence, and let the day unfold on my terms. A hot shower when I pleased, a rummage through the fridge at midnight. Simple, sacred things. But in the nursing home, privacy dissolved like sugar in rain. Staff bustled in with a knock. If you were lucky, room checks hummed on a schedule, and shared spaces meant you were rarely alone. Even the basics, dressing, bathing, often came with a stranger's hands, kind but unfamiliar. My first week, I stood in my room, clutching a towel, waiting for an aide to help me shower. I'd done it myself for 90 years, but here, my balance wasn't trusted. The weight stretched on, the tile cold against my feet, and I felt smaller than I ever had. Then there was my roommate, Edith, a sweet soul with a laugh like a bell. We got along fine, but her late-night coughing fits and the soft glow of her TV kept me awake. Down the hall, others weren't so lucky. Tales of roommates who shouted in their sleep or left messes no one could ignore. Your space isn't yours. It's borrowed, shaped by rules and faces you didn't choose. Dignity erodes in the little things, being spoken to like a child, waiting for permission to live your day. If this path calls, ask, can you let go of the quiet walls you've built around yourself? Because once they're down, you'll feel the draft. Regret 6. A door that locks behind you. When I moved in, I told myself it was a trial run. If it doesn't fit, I'll go home, I thought, picturing my house waiting like an old friend. But reality had other plans. My kids started clearing out my place, selling furniture, boxing up keepsakes, talking about renting it out. It's safer this way, Mom, they said when I hinted at returning. Meanwhile, my body weakened. My confidence waned. The longer I stayed, the harder leaving became. Not just a choice, but a maze of barriers. I met Margaret, a retired teacher who'd planned a short stay after a fall. She'd dreamed of returning to her cottage, her roses, her cat. But her savings dwindled, her house sold, and her strength faded. I thought I'd get out, she said, her voice thin. Now it's too late. That's the secret no one tells you. Moving in feels reversible until it isn't. If this is your fork in the road, ask, are you ready for a choice that might seal itself shut? Drop a number 6 if you're still here. I'd love to know. Final thoughts. A life worth holding. Looking back, aging doesn't sting me. It's the belief that this was my only road that does. At 92, I expected ease and safety. I found a slow unraveling instead. Not every nursing home is a shadow. Some need its care, and it serves them well. But before you step in, weigh what you're leaving behind. If I could rewind, I'd have clung to my home, fought for help that kept my freedom intact, asked harder questions. If this choice is yours, don't just ask what's easiest, ask what's yours. Hold tight to the life you've built for as long as you can. Tell me in the comments, what's one thing you'll carry forward from this? Your voice keeps this conversation alive. New section, Regret 7. The stories that fade. Here's one more truth I've uncovered, a quiet ache that crept up over time. In a nursing home, your stories, the ones that make you you, start to blur. At home, every corner held a memory. The dent in the wall from Jake's first bike crash, the porch swing where I'd rocked Lily to sleep, the kitchen table scarred from decades of laughter and spilled wine. Those places spoke my history back to me, kept my past alive. But here, in a room with no echoes, those tales feel like whispers in the wind. I'd always been the storyteller, spinning yarns about my childhood in the 30s, the war years, the day I met my husband under a sky streaked with rain. My grandkids would perch on the couch, wide-eyed, begging for just one more. But in the nursing home, there's no audience for that. The staff rush by, too busy for tales. Other residents drift in their own worlds. Some can't hear, some can't remember. I tried once, sharing a memory with Edith about the time I danced all night at a 50s sock hop. She smiled, but her eyes glazed over, lost in her own fog. Then there's Tom, a new face who arrived last month. He'd been a pilot, flew cargo planes over mountains that kissed the clouds. His room's bare, but his mind's a gallery of adventures. Storms he outran, landings he nailed. He told me once, over watery coffee, how he'd sketch those peaks in his logbook. Now, he sketches nothing. No one asks, he said, shrugging. So, I stopped telling. It's not just the stories, it's the telling that keeps you whole. Without it, you fade, a book no one opens. If this life beckons, ask, where will your stories live when the walls don't know your name? Because once they quiet, you'll miss their song more than you know.